Let's look at the differences between sharding and partitioning. These two terms are like very similar and often confusing. In general sense, we get like we want to divide the data for better performance and other aspects. But the inner working and concepts are very different. So let's see and demystify the difference. So the biggest difference is when we say sharding of a database, we are actually dividing into multiple databases. This is the biggest concept or the biggest point to take in mind. So, for an example, let's say we have a user DB. So, it contains data of all the users of the world for our application, which can grow pretty big and difficult to maintain, and it will have its impacts. So, what we usually do, we shard the data into multiple databases by, say, a country, a city, or continent, depending upon our use cases. So, for an example, let's say we are dividing it by country. So, you have UK, you have China, you have, say, India. So, this is sharding. Now, what is partitioning? Partitioning is like we are actually just partitioning a single database into what we say as different partitions. It's like a database inbuilt concept. So, what we can partition by? Let's take an example. So, here again we have a big database. Say this also as the user database. And what we are partitioning by, we can take an example of partition by date. So this database instance remains the same, or there is only a single database. We don't have a user DB January, user DB February, and so it's just an inner partitioning. So for example, say Jan, Feb, March, these are the partitions. So this is the biggest difference that we should keep in mind. Now we'll see more about them, how to configure them, and other points. So let's go ahead. So you would have question like, okay, the data is divided, but how the code application or the query knows where to run or fire it? I would just explain on a high level what is going on under the hood. Okay, so let's say for partitioning, and we have a table. The example we had was of users, right? So when we have table, I'm not going like a syntax wise everything should be correct. I'm just writing for you people to understand. So like here we create table user, and we may have certain conditions, then we just call it partition, by range. And the condition here, the example ours was creation date, right? January, February. So I will say creation date. Okay. And we can then go on partitioning, like partition values less than maybe Jan, then partition values something else like less than March. This we know is not correct, the syntax is not correct, it's just for an example. Now what happens when we write a query? Suppose we want to select, so select star from user db, and whenever we give where and the partition key, here the date is there, right? So creation date, okay, like greater than March. Here the database engines identifies this condition, and then it knows where to look in the partition. So suppose there are like 12 million records and we are partitioned by month. Okay, so each month will have approx 1 million records. So now the query and the fetch and the identification would just be on the 1 million records. So the query gets faster. And we can keep on partitioning, but we should be wary of other things as well. But this is the overall concept. Okay, so I would say database engine plays the part here. It knows by default where to fire the query among the partition if we have set the partitions like this. Now let's take example of sharding. We had example where the users were of different locations, right? So what was it? UK. We have sharded with UK, China, India. So we have data at different places, but how the application or the query would know where to go. Okay, so I would like to highlight one thing here. The keyword partition key is very important. Okay, so what is the partition key here? I would say creation date. Similarly, we have sharding key here. Okay, so here we have sharded with region. Okay, and we may build the routing logic on the application level or the middleware level and other things. But the concept is we have a way to determine where to send the query when we have the shards. Like when we will write SQL fetch something region equal to UK, then we already have the inbuilt logic to go to UK. That's it. Signing off for now, I would say in a nutshell, these are powerful techniques for managing large data sets. Each have their own strengths and potential weaknesses, which people can develop themselves, because in software engineering, everything has pros and cons, right? I would just say like sharding is a broader concept than partitioning and a newer concept. Thank you. Thank you for listening. Please stay tuned because what we are trying to do is like demystify software engineering. And the idea is like when people read or listen our things, it should be a conceptual lifelong learning. They don't need to get back to the same thing for the concepts or read again just before the interviews. We would also bust technical jargons which are like very, I would say, hi-fi and difficult to comprehend in easy conversational language. We also provide free mock interviews. Stay tuned and keep in touch. Thank you.